Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lucore Automotive. Today, I'm working on my 1970 Pontiac LeMans. Recently, I did have a fuel pump go bad on this car on my way back from No Name Nationals, which was in the fall of last year. This car hasn't really done a lot since then. But a lot of people have brought up the question about whether or not I did an oil change immediately after that when that fuel pump went bad, whether or not there was some fuel contamination in the oil. And I'll be honest, I just drove the car back and I pretty much have parked it since then. I haven't really done much of anything since then. So today I actually am going to go ahead and pull out that oil and see exactly what it looks like. I'm sure it's going to be probably fuel fouled and blackened. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to do a little bit of conversation about oil filters, especially if you happen to have headers on one of these kind of cars. So going to be a short, little easy episode, but I wanted to use this opportunity to answer a question that you may or may not have ever asked, is what is a good option for an oil filter on one of these kind of cars with a set of headers? So stay tuned, that's what we're going to talk about. This car is a 1970 Pontiac LeMans. The block that's in it is a 1972 455 block. The nice thing is with Pontiac, they're pretty much all the same. So all of those generations had the same sort of oil setup on the side. And it's also across all of the different engine sizes. If you go to a 350 or a 400 or a 455, they're all block-wise identical on the outside. So you're not going to have to worry about whether or not you have a 350, a 400, or 455. This exact same process will work on all of them. This exact same product will work on all of them. So yours doesn't have to be the big boy. It can be the little guy. Now, with that said, that is a 1972 Pontiac 350. This is the one that actually came out of my green car. That one. This is the oil filter housing unit from this 1971 350 block. They all look the same. They're all the same idea. This one has been vapor blasted in our vapor honing cabinet to be able to make it look all nice and pretty. But it does sit here on the side of the block like so, and it orients your oil filter that way. Right? You're with me so far. When you are running stock manifolds, no big deal. It just hangs the filter off the side of the motor. Super easy to get to, no problem. However, when you're running long tube headers, this does get a little bit more tricky. The way that they sweep, you end up with an oil filter up in there. You can see how these headers are done, and my heat wrap I've absolutely destroyed. But the tricky thing is that filter sits in between header tubes, and you don't really have an easy way to get it out. It can't come out. It's got to kind of come this way. Now these are also my transmission cooler tubes. So you got to get a little tricky to be able to get it out of here. I'm going to go ahead and finagle this thing out of here. I actually went ahead and already got it loose. At least finger loose. I can back this thing out of here. Hopefully not wear whatever oil is still in this filter. Okay. All right. That filter is down, and we can go out the side. Look at me. I didn't wear that. Good job, Austin. One thing I will mention, these are Flowtech headers. I did also do this same exact situation on a set of Hedman headers. Now, depending on how exactly your headers are oriented, they may be slightly different, but the way the Pontiac heads sit and the way the exhaust comes off those heads, you're pretty much stuck this way. There's only so many ways you can skin this cat. You can see where the oil filter housing unit is and how the exhaust tubes are on either side there. So you don't really have a lot of options. Now the tricky part is, when you go to the auto parts store and you say, hey, I have a 1970 Pontiac LeMans with a 455 in it, I need an oil filter, they're going to give you something like this. Ta-da! It's just a normal canister oil filter. This is a Parts Plus brand. Part number would be PH24, but it's going to cross-reference into the AC Delco PF24, the Champ PH24, a Fram PH25, a K&N PS2003, a Napa 1258, a Wix 51 258. The problem is the size of this canister versus the size of this old filter. As you can see, we have a considerable amount of difference in size. The problem with this canister is it won't fit. You can kind of play with it however you want to, but between where the tubes are run and where the frame of the car is and where the lower control arm is, you just physically cannot get that filter in there. You know, maybe you can bend your transmission cooler lines out of the way and rod them a little bit differently, but there's just no physical way to be able to get this filter in there at all. So what's your other option? Well, in my case, it's a Wix 51 522. One of these guys. Wix part number 51 522. Now it's going to be slightly less capacity than the larger canister is, but it seals exactly the same way, and that's your important feature. If you don't do this correctly and you use the wrong filter, as soon as you run that motor up to oil pressure, it will dump your oil everywhere. So you want to make sure that that seal is exactly the same size, which indeed it is. So this will work. I know it'll work because this is what I've run on this car before. A lot of people will run into this problem. If you've ever hung a set of headers on a Pontiac, it sucks. Believe me, I know. I've done it numerous times. And one of the challenges you're going to run into is what oil filter do you run? So for me, that's my answer. It's the Wix 51 522. The PH24 is fine if you have normal exhaust manifolds. It just screws right there on the side of the block. No problem at all. But will not work when you have a set of headers. At least all of the sets of headers that I've run into myself. So let me go ahead and put this filter on there, and then I'm going to pull this oil out and see exactly where we are. I am a pre-lube my filter kind of guy, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get a little bit of lube on my seal here, and I'll put a little bit of oil in the filter, and then I'll toss this guy on there. I actually am going to pour some of the oil out of this filter, and we're going to look and see, make sure that there's nothing truly funky or sparkly coming out of this filter. Well, certainly black. Doesn't seem to be too sparkly, but we'll cut this filter open also, just to make sure that everything is okay. See if I can do this without wearing any of it. The other thing is, nice thing with having these big shop windows behind me is I can look through the oil as it comes out. See if there's a little bit of extra sparkle additive in here. We're going to hope not. It's just really, really, really black. Now this is a built Pontiac 455. It's got 6X heads, stock crank, Eagle rods, SRP pistons, 9.5 to 1, but it's a basically like a considered a 455 HO. It's nothing totally rowdy, but it is still running a flat tappet camshaft, so oil decisions are important. Many things most people don't realize is oil's changed considerably since these cars were new and since flat tappet camshafts were new. And a lot of people, when they get into hot rodding or they buy themselves a classic car, they don't realize that you can't just go grab any old oil off the shelf, like a Valvoline or a Castrol or whatever, and throw it into one of these cars. If it's not built for that kind of oil, you're actually going to end up beating these motors to death, flattening out camshafts and bearings, and now it's time to build a motor. I probably have 10,000 miles on this car, maybe more, since this motor has been built, and I have driven the absolute hell out of it. I've driven it all over on Power Tour. I've driven it all over the country on numerous road trips. I've driven it out and back to Sikeston, Missouri for the No Name Nationals. I put a ton of miles on this car. It's been to many car shows, though it doesn't look like it's really a car show car. it's quite a fun little vehicle. So I truly do enjoy this thing, and I've got to make sure that I keep my investment, because that motor was very, very expensive, in one piece. So I am a bit particular about what I run for oils. While that finishes draining, make sure my filter lip is all nice and oily. You'll have different people that say whether or not you should do this or not. I'm a believer that you should. If you don't believe it, that's your problem. So I'm going to go ahead and snake this filter up in here. And one thing to remember, boys and girls, is these filters, especially when it's in an awkward location, the last thing you want to have to deal with is the fact that you've got a really, really hard to get to oil filter that's full of oil, and you've got to try to figure out how to get a wrench up in there to be able to turn it. Oil filter wrench, big clunky thing, doesn't fit in tight spaces very well, can drive you nuts if you over torque your oil filter, so be careful with that. Speaking from experience. No need to ooga-dooga. They shut the air off on me. Back in a second. Give me a minute to let the airlines refill so I can get the locks off this lift. Let the car down. When it comes to high zinc oils for flat tappet camshafts, I have two personal options that I use. This is not a paid advertisement. Neither of these people pay me for anything whatsoever. Either Driven, which used to be Joe Gibbs Racing Oils, or Schaeffer's. They have a high zinc racing blend that I have been using in this car almost all of its life. I have used both Driven and Schaeffer's on just about every classic that I own, and the zinc is what you really, really, really need for a flat tappet camshaft. For old school stuff, don't just put budget oil in it that you can just get out of wherever. Almost nowhere tends to stock the high zinc oils unless you're looking for it at a place like a Jegs or a Summit or something like that. So plan ahead if you're going to be doing an oil change. Now, if you happen to have a roller valve train, doesn't matter. You can put whatever you want to in it depending on what your engine build is. But if you don't have a roller camshaft, you're going to make sure you use the proper oil in it. Otherwise, that motor is going to be beating itself while you're driving it down the road. Capiche? All right. With that in mind, make sure you get the proper amount of oil, because if you don't have it and you need an extra quart, you're screwed. Now, this is a stock Pontiac oil pan, so it's going to take 6 quarts, so I have 6 quarts plus 1 just in case I need it, which I'm not going to need it because I'm not trying to do the Freiburger long pour here. So give me a minute, let me get this guy filled up. We'll fire it up, make sure we got oil pressure. Then we go for a test drive. It's probably an excellent time to ask, what's your preferred brand? What's your preferred flavor? Are you use a conventional oil kind of guy and then add some lead additive to it? Are you a whatever's cheapest at the gas station kind of guy? Are you somebody that believes in and uses a premium brand of oil? I'm kind of curious. Let's not start a fight. Everybody's got their preferences. But we can have this conversation like adults. What's your favorite? This stuff's expensive, so get every drop. Look at that, I scrounged a 1/16 of a quart back. That's money right there. Okay, wash my hands, turn the key, make sure we got oil pressure, make sure we don't have any leaks, and we're good. No leaks. All right, guys, it's end of the day, so I'm gonna drive this sucker home. It's one of those random days in February where it's 55 degrees outside, so I'm gonna enjoy something fun on the way home. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you're a Pontiac guy and you have any questions or anything about what I've got in this car, what I've done with this car, there's a lot more to come. At this point in time, it's old school with a big motor in it, but it's still drum brakes, it's still old school stamp suspension, still almost stock HO. But there's some interesting stuff to come. So if you're interested in this car, if you have any other questions, please go ahead and ask me in the comment section below. If you learned anything from this, I'm glad. If you're entertained by this, I'm even more glad. Hope you stick around, come over to the next one. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of jazz. I'll see you soon, guys. Take care. No, that wasn't necessary.